Welcome everyone. In this session, we are going to discuss about the topic from biology to artificial neural networks under the subject neural networks and its applications. So, what does mean by neural networks? A neural network is a computational model inspired by the human brain, featuring the interconnected nodes arranged in layers that learns to recognize patterns and make prediction decision making, and it is used for various applications. Then what does mean by neuron structure? So neuron structure will be composed of these three main parts, that is a dendrite, cell body, and an axon. Dendrites receive the signals, cell body process them, and the axon will transmit the output signals. Synapses. Neurons communicate via synapses using electrical and chemical signals. So the next one is artificial neural networks. So what does mean by artificial neural networks? So it is called as ANN. So ANN are the computational models which is inspired by the human brain, and it is designed to solve the complex problems like pattern recognition, decision making, etc. So what is the basic building block of ANN is artificial neurons or perceptron. So perceptron is nothing but an artificial neurons. So what is the components of the perceptron? So the perceptron will include the inputs along with suitable weights, summation function, then activation function. So there are various activation functions available like a step, sigmoid, ReLU, tanh. So based on the application, so what you are going to use, we can choose that particular activation functions. So learning in ANN is achieved by adjusting the weights using algorithms like backpropagation. So using backpropagation algorithms, so we can adjust the weights by proceeding towards the backward directions. So by adjusting the weight, we can make the prediction, that is output prediction, more accurate. So in that case, so the desired output and the actual output will be the same. So the main purpose of the backpropagation algorithm is to minimize the errors. That is, the magnitude of errors can be reduced if we go for the backpropagation by adjusting the weights. Then what is a brief history of the neural networks? So, in early biological inspiration between 1940s to 1950s, so McCloch and Pitts, 1943, they proposed the first artificial neuron models using a binary threshold concepts. The next one is a Donald Hebb in 1949 introduced a Hebbian learnings. So he introduced a concept that cells that fires together will wire together. The perceptron development occurs during 1950 to 1960. So the Frank Rosenblatt developed the perceptron, that is the first practical neural network model. It could learn simple matters, so but it has failed to solve the nonlinear complex problems like XOR gates. The criticism and AI winter occurs during 1960s to 1970s, where the Minsky and Pepper show the limitations of the single layer perceptrons. So what is meant by single layer perceptron? So single layer perceptron will include only the input layers and the output layer. So the single represents single output layer where the various competitions will occur in the output layers. So during that period, so the research fundings was a decline, so which will lead to the AI winter. The next one is a revival with backpropagation in 1980s. The Ronald Williams, Hinton, and Rummel had popularized the backpropagation algorithm, so they enable efficient training of the multi-layer neural networks. What are the various applications and the new architectures? So in 1990s, so the neural networks was used in the speech recognition, handwriting recognition, and prediction models. So the where the development of a CNN, convolution neural networks, and RNN, recurrent neural networks, will occur early in the 1990s. So next one, they introduced the concept of the deep learning in the 2000s and even in the present. So the growth of the deep learning will occur due to the powerful GPUs and the larger data sets. So the new architectures like transformers, the deep learning architectures, and the generative models like GAN, that is the generative adversarial networks, are used in the deep learning concept. Next one is the modern trends. So the modern trends is various applications are expandable with the AIs, robotics, healthcare, and the autonomous applications. So large scale models like a generative pre-trained transformers and the birds are used in the modern trends. And this is a summary of the brief history. So in 1943, McCulloch and this is a summary of the history of the neural networks. So in 1943, McCulloch and Pitt's neural model was developed. In 1958, Rosenblatt's perceptron. In 1969, Minsky and Pappas critique technique was found. So in 1986, they introduced the backpropagation algorithms. In 1990s, practical applications emerged, and in 2000, deep learning evolution begins. So this is a biological neural networks. This is the simple structure of the biological neurons. So it consists of the soma, then this axon, and this thing is called as the dendrites. So dendrites, cell body, and the axon. So these three main parts plays a major role in the biological neural networks. So this nerve-like structure is called as a dendrites. So this dendrites will be connected with other axon or other axon from other neurons or any other neurons will be connected to the dendrites. Or here we can see, so this is the axon of this particular neuron, so it will be connected to other dendrites. So this dendrites will receive the input signals. Soma, that is a cell body, will process the received signals, and axon will transmit the output signals. And this output signal will be connected with some other dendrites of another neurons. Biological neural networks. So what is a neuron is called as a nerve cell. So it is the basic unit of the nervous system that communicates through synapses. So synapses is a part which will perform the communication either through the electrical or mechanical signals. So what are the types of neurons? Sensory neurons will respond to the stimuli. Motor neurons will control the muscles and glands. Interneurons will connect neurons within the brain and spinal cords. So these are the three main parts of the neurons we discussed. That is the dendrites, the cell body, and the axon, which will receive the signal, process the signal, and transmits the signal to other neurons. What are the characteristics? So the characteristics means it will receive the multiple input signals. The signals are modified at a synapses. The neurons will fire when input exceeds the threshold. That is, only when the neuron fires, it gets activated, then it will process the input and it will proceed for the output signals. So the output signal can be sent to many other neurons. What are the additional properties? So distributed memory in synapses, fault tolerance, continuous functioning even with neuron loss. Learning occurs through changes in the synaptic weight. This is a simple structure of the artificial neural networks. Input layer, hidden layer, and the output layer. So X1, X2, X3 represents various inputs. Each and every connections will be associated with corresponding weight W1, W2, W3. And this is the hidden layer and neurons capital Y. So in this neurons only the summation operation will perform. For example, here the Y can be written as X1 W1 plus X2 W2 plus X3 W3. So this will perform the summation operation of the input layer along with corresponding weight. And here in the output units consist of Z1, Z2. So where it will be dealing with V1 and V2. So the number of hidden layers will varies based on the application we use using the multi-layer perceptrons. So the artificial neural networks is a mathematical model that tries to simulate the structure and functionalities of the biological neural networks. And here in the hidden units, the neurons, so each and every neurons will be having its own bias values. So finally that bias value will be added with the summation inputs. So in the basic building blocks of every artificial neural networks is artificial neurons. So that is a simple mathematical model. So such a model has a three simple set of rules. So that is a multiplication, summation, and the activation function. So each and every neurons will be having its own activation function. So based on that activation only, so the neurons will again proceed for the connections with the next layer neurons. So artificial neural networks ANN. So in artificial neurons, each input is multiplied by weight. The summation function adds all the weighted inputs along with the bias value. The result will be passed through the activation function to produce the output. The information processing system in the ANN will be inspired by the biological neural networks, and it consists of many simple processing units called the neurons or nodes. The neurons are connected through the weighted links. Each neuron applies an activation function to determine its output. What are the different characteristics? So it is defined by the network architecture, what we use, the training algorithms, and the activation function. These are the various applications of ANN, like pattern recognition, classification, prediction, optimization problem, decision-making problem, and the various other applications we can use the ANN. These are all the major differences between the biological and the artificial neural networks. So the size-wise it varies. The human brains has 86 billion neurons, whereas ANN have comparatively fewer neurons. Processing brain works asynchronously, whereas ANN will work synchronously. Speed. The biological neurons are slower, ANN processes signals faster. The topology. Biological neurons are highly complex topology, whereas ANN usually have the simpler structured architectures. Fault tolerance. Biological systems are naturally fault tolerance. ANN have limited fault tolerance. In the power consumption, human brain uses about like a 20 watts, while computers or GPU consumes a much higher powers. So learning, brain learns continuously through experience. ANN will learn by adjusting the weights during training. Application, biological networks can learn multiple tasks, while ANN are usually the task-specific purpose. So training methods, ANN commonly use the gradient descent algorithms, while brain learning mechanisms are still not found understood. So these are all the major difference between the biological and artificial neural networks. So thereby the biological ANN is inspired from the biological neurons. Thank you.